Yeah, thank you so much, Tara. I really appreciate the opportunity to present this information and connect with this group directly. Full disclosure, this is my first time hosting a webinar, so I will absolutely be learning along with you today. Questions, as Tara mentioned, please enter them in the chat box to your left. And I do have a few spots in the webinar where we can kind of answer the questions as we go along. So please don't sit on your hands, ask questions as we go. I'll be sharing a lot of helpful resources, or resources that I found actually quite helpful over the last few years as Queen's University kind of developed its Young Alumni Engagement Strategy. So please also feel free to ask about the resources, whether specific or just general. Also, full disclosure, my 2-year-old daughter has decided to have multiple ear infections so far in January this year, so please excuse me if I'm a little incoherent or rambling. I've had about 6 cups of coffee so far today, and I might be having some heart palpitations, but I'll deal with that with the paramedics after the webinar. I will follow up with Tara and pass along some of the documents that I'll reference as well, and maybe they can be passed along with the presentation after the webinar is done. So with all of that to be said, we'll dive right in. And we're off. So I'm really committed to making sure that there is a tangible learning outcome to this webinar. So after participating, I'm hoping that you'll have tangible building blocks to a scalable and sustainable young alumni engagement strategy. This is my commitment to you as the end user, but also to your young alumni communities at your institutions. You will also be able to, hopefully at the end of this webinar, be able to make intentional decisions based on your current situation and reality. And you will see the power of the pilot program and benefits of the pressure-free process. So these things have been very helpful for myself, my colleagues here at Queen's, as we kind of tried to figure out an intentional and strategic way to engage with our young alumni community. So this will be a very personal journey through what I would say is a very hot topic for most post-secondary education institutions. And by no means has Queen's University figured it all out. But we are right now very much immersed in it. So that's kind of the concepts and themes that you'll be noticing as to how I kind of lead this discussion. I'll highlight some building blocks throughout the presentation that can be applied to your specific circumstances and situations. There will be lots of ideas, lots of brainstorming. That's kind of how I like to operate. So please feel free to also throw out your ideas, your suggestions, some of your key learning that have happened for you. And hopefully some of these suggestions will help your institution avoid kind of some of the pitfalls that we've found or wasting your resources. I'll also try and finish a little bit early for you. I know over lunchtime it can be a little bit stressful, so those are my commitments to you for sure. So the agenda today, I think that when you're talking about young alumni for your institution, it's always important to start with students. And that may seem obvious, but it really isn't obvious for, I think, a lot of places. So also going to be touching on the importance of transitioning from that student mindset into their new role as alumni of your institutions. It's one of the biggest transitions in life that happens, and so I'm hoping that you can help make that support for that transition obvious and available. Do millennials matter? This is a really big question that I hear a lot, and a lot of people kind of complaining and shaking their fist and telling millennials to get off their lawn and everything. And it's very easy to dismiss this demographic, but really the question is where you think your next big volunteer or your next big donor are going to come from. And this is the generation you're going to need to start building that relationship with if you're going to have a sustainable pipeline of engagement strategies. So then, young alumni engagement strategies, hopefully these will be scalable ideas that you can apply to your own situation. The show me generation is really all about what's in it for them. There's so much competition for their time, their talent, and their support. It's really important that you spell it out clearly as to why they should choose you. And then also I'd like to just focus a little bit on having a dialogue with this group. So asking, answering, and acting is kind of the main points there. All right, so we'll start with students. And this is all about filling the pipeline. So if you think about students as future alumni, that may help kind of shape the way that you treat them when they're on campus. So I know that high school students are heavily recruited at Queen's by our admissions and registrar's office to get them here. They choose the highest achieving students, they choose the best students for this campus culture, and then they get here, and not only does nobody really kind of bother them or work with them, but really educational institutions actually make it quite difficult for them to do the things that they need and want to do. They're writing the biggest checks they've probably ever written, and they're just trying to figure out how to live on their own for the first time. So they're trying to figure out all these things. If the university can be there and support those transitions in a really supportive and positive way, I think that the individuals will be much more likely to want to stay in touch and ultimately to donate to your university. So it's all about making transitions easier for these students. So it's about career mentoring, guidance, support through the alumni network and career services, but really helping the students help themselves see success and what success means for them. So offering discounts to stores they already shop at, traveling that they're already doing, or things that they use on a daily basis go a long way to building those relationships. It's all about helping them make their lives easier through the stuff that they already do. So if you can offer either a platform or multiple platforms for them to advocate for you, your institution, your mission, vision, and goals, for you, about you, either on social platforms or otherwise, it's going to go a long way for that engagement process and that relationship with those people. The transition from student to young alumni to alumni is actually best seen, in my opinion, from the University of Pennsylvania. So UPenn has a logo for their Student Alumni Association, and then they've taken elements of that logo and they've kind of built it in a way that makes sense for a young alumni brand. So they have a young alumni logo, and then they have their alumni logo. So if you Google University of Pennsylvania, they have a student logo, they have a young alumni logo, and then they have their alumni logo brand. And they really do kind of all relate to each other, and they're all quite well branded together. So visually, lead them through the process. So my first building block is engage your advancement office with any students that you have access to, whether that's work study, existing student union leaders, campus influencers, formal student alumni groups, summer interns, any students who can help guide, shape, support, and direct your language and your approach and strategy. Sit down with them, talk to them about where they are, what they're doing, and how they would like to be communicated with. So they can help you connect to the young alumni demographic in a way that probably your faculty or staff peers can't. So now the importance of transition. So again, I kind of touched on it previously, but transitioning students into their new role as alumni is something that is not only unique because those students have been students for, 18, 20 years, so they really do think of themselves as students. So it's about helping them see themselves as alumni of your institution. So at Queen's, full disclosure, we have some really great extensive resources and established programming. I understand that. We've been operating with a formal Student Alumni Association since 1986, and this has been a large part of my role at Queen's for the last 10 years. However, understanding that, your institutions can also take pieces or choose elements to implement on your own. So at Queen's, Our Student Alumni Association, the QSAA, Queen's Student Alumni Association, hosts a suite of event-based programming to help students succeed. So the Backpack to Briefcase program is outside the classroom skills training facilitated by our Central Career Services. So this includes resume writing, interview skills, LinkedIn training. This is a win-win. Career Services loves having access to a larger pool of students, and the QSAA gets to offer these support tools directly to their peers. We typically see about 30 to 120 students, undergrad, graduate from all faculties, attend these events depending on the time of year. We've learned pretty quickly that exams and campus events really influence attendance, and after the holidays, when parents, friends, and family are pressuring those students with, what are you doing next year, we tend to see a much higher rate. We have a resume writing session for tonight, for example, that has over 120 people registered, and there's an interview skills workshop with, again, about 130 people registered for next week. Our alumni speaker program profiles some of our best and brightest alumni. So we are, again, very fortunate that we have some pretty high-profile alumni in our network. So we have an astronaut who is the next commander for the International Space Station. We have a celebrity chef, CBC Dragon's Den Dragon, NBC News anchor, BuzzFeed Canada social media editor are all alumni of our institution. So we have invited them back to connect with our students, formal lecture style, and just it's kind of up to them. Usually it's about a 45-minute speaking address with some time for Q&A. So I would say that often I am quite surprised at the generosity of our alumni. They really do like coming back and mentoring the current students about how they achieved success. Next is our Q Your Future program. So this is specific transition programming to teach soft skills for success in the job market. It's specifically marketed to our fourth-year students, but any students can access it. So this is more about dining etiquette or interviewing over a meal, dress for success, professional headshots, financial literacy, personal branding, networking. These kind of skills that employers have told us directly they wish the new hires had a little bit more skill or were a little bit more polished at. And I know other universities, like the University of Indiana, actually offer this as a young alumni program. So if you're interested in running any kind of classroom sessions, these kind of things I think work really well for the demographic that we're talking about. The Student Alumni Association also has a student philanthropy element, so it's called the Tricolor Giving Initiative, which is all about inspiration through education. So it just talks a little bit about why donating to the university is important. And we also offer career services for current students and then up to 1 year out after graduation. And that includes telephone, in-person sessions, personality assessments for less than cost. So our student to alumni programming, really a lot of it has to do with social transitions. And so is your institution mobile friendly? The students are on social, and then largely when they graduate, they don't stop being on social. So it's really important that your institution is mobile friendly. And that's everywhere that you push messaging. Make sure that it lands on smartphones, because the last comprehensive study has 85% of millennials owning a smartphone, with 98% in North America age 18 to 24 owning a smartphone. So everybody consumes their information now on smartphones. My advice and recommendation and experience has been, if you choose one social platform and run with it, that's probably your best path to success, rather than trying to be all things to all people. So again, you can chat with some of the students on campus, or have some informational interviews with some of your young alumni. Find out what platforms they're usually on and hammer those. For example, 4 years ago, Twitter, everybody was on it, and now we get the message that students and younger people specifically are less and less consuming their information through Twitter. Young alumni mentoring platforms. So there's a ton of mentoring platforms that you could utilize, and I know Graduate, Brazen, Switchboard all have really great platforms and comprehensive programs. But we, about 5 years ago, were in a tricky situation where we didn't have a budget and we were trying to engage with our alumni population to mentor our students. So we set up a group on LinkedIn and built a really terrific career network. So it is called Queen's Connects Career Network. It's on LinkedIn. I am happy to add you to the group, anyone on this call. So I will pass along the tiny URL, but essentially it's just http://tinyurl.com/QueensConnects, and that's QueensConnects. So please go in Queens Connects. I will make sure that you're added to the group, and you can see what we've done over the last 4 years. There's a couple of reasons why we chose LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is, again, based on the most recent numbers, 97% accurate for biographic information. So in this world where data is king and everybody is scrambling for better address update information from their alumni, we are able to gain some insights as to where those individuals are working and where they are currently living. However, by using LinkedIn, we are kind of tied to its updates and support process. So, for example, it is now changing a little bit as to how it's supporting its groups mentality, but by and large, it was a good choice for us. It handles all of the updates and language issues. It's a real positive from a budget point of view. Essentially, the only cost to us is the cost of a kind of an enhanced membership, and it has allowed for some terrific partners with our career services office that co-manages the group with me. So please go into Queens Connects or add me on LinkedIn. So I'm just at LinkedIn, and it's Ben Seawald. I'm the Queen's University Alumni Officer, not the husband of reality TV star Jessica Duger. Queen's Career Services also has 2 phenomenal tip sheets, one for building a profile and the second for utilizing that profile, which I'm happy to share with Tara, that she can maybe share with this group after the fact.
Sure.
So really it's about kind of leveraging a little bit of kind of the recent alumni time, talent, and treasure. However, I would suggest that there is a 4th T in that wonderful alliteration, and that's technology. A lot of these younger alumni have a terrific capacity and influence on their social platforms. So if you can help them help you get the word out and offer tangible benefits on some of that technology, it's a win-win for everybody. So all of that to say, the second building block that I'm going to offer is to provide some student alumni programming, and that's event programming, swag, perks, career services to keep the relationship going. So you may be familiar with the fact that recent research indicates 7 to 9 touch points, and that's an event or an email or a newsletter, campus magazine, service, etc. So 7 to 9 touch points to counteract a fundraising ask in the mind of the average person. So try and get that ratio as close to kind of 1 to 7 or 1 to 9 to keep that relationship as positive as possible. Okay, so I know that was a lot of stuff kind of on student engagement, so I'm not sure if there are any questions from the group right now that I can answer and get that out of the way.
As a reminder to folks, lines are muted, so we do encourage you to use the Q&A box on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. Ben, there are no questions so far.
Okay. I think that's good. So there we go. High-profile alumni formal lectures free of charge. We really try and provide these free of charge. Often we're in a situation where these are services to students, and so we want to make it accessible, and we want to make it as positive as possible. So there were a couple of situations where we did have to charge. One of those situations being when the NASA astronaut Drew Feustel came back to speak. A lot of that had to be, was more about cost recovery. And I mean, he flew in from Texas, and there was quite a bill on that event. I think we ended up charging $5 for people to attend, which didn't even really scratch the surface. But what we really didn't want was for people to register for the event and then not show up. So it was more of a kind of a placeholder fee, and it was about investing something to really see an incredible individual talk about an incredible experience. So that was kind of the alumni events are usually free of charge. I will get into, sorry, I just see the question about alumni speakers also being prospects. How does this program or others link back to development? I will get into that a little bit later in the presentation on connecting both with our development colleagues and also some of the other campus connections. So hopefully I'll answer that question in a little bit. With an eye on the time, I'll keep going. So, do millennials matter? And again, as I mentioned in the beginning, I hear a lot of complaining about this demographic. I hear a lot of fist shaking and get off my lawn and all that kind of stuff about millennials and how they just really don't get it and everything. And my perspective on that is interesting because I would say that they are who they are. And I think it's hard for me to complain about the way that an entire generation is. And that's not new to this generation. I know that the baby boomers were probably also kind of criticized in a very similar way, definitely Gen X. So every generation kind of has its transition growing pains. But why should you really care about this group? So what we did at Queen's really quickly is we, in 2015, the Queen's Office of Advancement created a Young Alumni Engagement Strategy group. And it created a document to have an informed, involved, and invested young alumni population. So just some really quick high-level, some really interesting things that came out of this is the first thing was to tie it back to the university mission, vision, goals. So right out of the gate, we listed kind of the advancement mission on the top of the document to move people to extraordinary levels of support for Queen's University. That's unique only to all of our alumni, and I think it really positions the young alumni as part of the greater group. The second thing we did was really set 3 clear goals for the engagement strategy. So to have an informed, involved, and invested young alumni population, which we define as 0 to 10 years out from graduation from their first degree at Queen's University, we identified 3 clear goals. Then we determined kind of what the path, the approach, and the application was going to be with 5 really clear steps. Fourth, we aligned that with current framework language. So over the last few years, we've been talking a lot about informing our alumni population, involving them, and investing in them and having them invest back in the community, either philanthropically or through volunteer efforts. Fifth, and another really important consideration, is to align with current trends and priorities. So it was important that we had some language in there about building a community that's inclusive for all individuals, working together to create an environment where everyone has a full, enriching experience. So in 2015, when we built this, it was before the university set a formal priority on racism, diversity, and inclusion, and also applying the Truth and Reconciliation Commission work as well. So actually, in preparing for this webinar, I realized that this document did need an update. So just really quickly on some metrics, there are some really incredible young alumni stats and outcomes from some really incredible institutions. Cornell is doing some really incredible things. As I mentioned, University of Pennsylvania, Gettysburg College, Indiana University, Texas Christian University, especially on philanthropy, George Mason, University of British Columbia, Guelph, Laurier, a number of schools, all are doing really great things. But there's also some really incredible research coming out of Deloitte, the Millennial Impact Report, and Academic Impressions. So just some quick stats. So at Queen's, 32% of our current alumni population, and more every year, are young alumni, recent grads, or grads of the last 10 years. So essentially, Queen's fills the Air Canada Centre every 4 years with graduates. This segment of alumni also represents the smallest percentage of alumni donors and smallest percentage of alumni donations. So if anybody on this call isn't at least a little bit scared by this, please call me immediately after this webinar to help calm me down a little bit. Millennial alumni are also more likely to donate to their favorite charity before their alma mater. So they don't see universities with the same need or impact as a local charity. A great way to think about this is millennials see donating to universities or colleges like giving to a mall rather than a store. So for us, it's a lot more about it's becoming more about showing the impact rather than the need, which is, I think, traditionally what we've always done. So if you want to, close your eyes or just imagine all of your work without any volunteer help. So after this initial bliss, the reality here at Queen's is that we would not be able to do a fraction of our yearly objectives without our tremendous volunteer assistance. Also, we would quickly suffer from this groupthink bias where everybody on the team has the same background, same ideas, and same perspectives. So keeping your future volunteers and keeping your current leaders engaged and involved in the process of the university is another tremendous reason to care about this millennial generation. So, why should you care? If you're making the case either with your superiors or on your team or even your own justification, it's pretty simple. If you don't relate with these folks now and engage with them and build that relationship, it's going to be a really hard road later. So really, I would just ask about the current population at your institution and the plan to replace the older alumni and their engagement. So volunteers, donors, and people who currently serve at your institution. Another really interesting stat that made me sit up and take notice is all about resources. So I hope you're sitting down, but Generation X and the Millennials are set to inherit $40 trillion with a T in the next 50 years. And I know there is a lot of kind of information about whether or not the baby boomer generation or even the Gen X generation are going to be transferring that wealth in traditional ways to their children, but still, that is a lot of money that is going from one generation into another. And again, if you don't have a solid relationship with these people, how are they going to transfer that wealth to you? The power of the pilot project is something that I've really learned over the last year, year and a half, as we've been kind of implementing our Queen's University Alumni Association Young Alumni Social Media Council concept. So Jenny Mitchell from Chavender Fundraising is a terrific resource, and she wrote a really great blog called The Power of a Pilot Program. She covers all the reasons to test ideas this way, develop change. I really recommend her work and hope that you find it helpful. It is so much easier to start small in scope, time frame, resources, etc., and leverage successes or learn from mistakes and quickly be able to change direction. My third building block on this webinar is that pilot projects can really jumpstart change if you feel overwhelmed on creating a whole new engagement framework. So a lot of this stuff, which I'll get into in a minute, is all about leveraging what you're already doing and thinking about adding a layer to speak directly to this demographic. So now just moving on to some young alumni engagement strategies. I think now we've got the poll. So if everyone could just tick off the boxes that they currently do or currently have influence over at their either university or college or institution, that would be terrific. And while people are doing that, I might just ask a couple of questions or answer a couple of the questions that I've noticed popping up in the chat box. Tara, do we need to implement this anyway, or? Okay, there it's going, great. So students first. Initiatives for implementing students in first year. There's a lot of support resources for students in first year through our resident program, Residence Life program. Very comprehensive. A lot of those individuals are not even thinking about kind of 4 years from now, those kind of things. And so it's really about modeling more that support network and implementing it for upper year students. So we can kind of take the Residence Life approach and apply it to some of the engagement strategies moving forward. So we currently don't do much for the first year market other than we try and get a couple of first year students on our Student Alumni Association and invite some of the key influencing first year students to some of our key alumni events. But otherwise, first year students, we have found, have less of a capacity about thinking about their lives as alumni. So, all right, so we'll go to the poll results now. Have I clicked? Is that? Nope. Just do it verbally. Great. So there we are. Wow. Okay, so just about everybody does alumni awards. And so what we've done at Queen's is we have actually created a Young Alumni Award. And so again, as you're recognizing your high-achieving alumni and your community service alumni and whatever other categories you have, you can easily recognize your young alumni demographic. Can be kind of a one-to-watch award or can be straight up called your Young Alumni Award. And that, A, gives people something to strive for, gives them a reason to stay connected to your university, and recognizes them amongst a pretty high-level group of peers. Alumni Magazine, a lot of people do that, so you can also write some really great articles on students who are first year out, 2 years out, what they kind of saw as success, those kind of things. Convocation, another really great way to engage your alumni community if you haven't done this. Queen's University has an opportunity to have representatives from the Alumni Association say a quick 30-second speech on behalf of the Alumni Association, and you can easily have those people be younger alumni. Alumni social media accounts, just make sure you're on the right ones and you're speaking their language. Branch or chapter programs, same thing. You can easily do a young alumni targeted event. In Toronto, for example, we have kind of a night out networking at a pretty high-profile bar or restaurant. And then, we've got monthly e-newsletters. So, I mean, essentially, the point of this poll is just to have everybody realize that you're kind of doing all of these things anyway, and you can easily layer in young alumni engagement strategies to all of these things. Alumni Perks program is great. You can absolutely leverage the perks to things that they're already using. So I know via rail discount, I know from the Toronto to Montreal corridor, Queen's students use the train all the time, and so you can make sure that they know that they get a 15% discount off any fares. And that's, I don't know if that's unique to Queen's, but I would imagine that via rail would be very interested to do those kind of things, as well as local businesses, access to the gymnasium, library, those kind of things. Basically look for anything that they're already doing. Okay, great. So really, I mean, the days are gone that alumni need you to connect with their peers or participate in their community or to gain leadership experience. They can do all of those things on their own. I really do believe in kind of, rather than, you know, there's a great old story about a gentleman who lost his keys, and he was looking under the lamppost, and a guy came up and asked him, "Oh, where'd you lose your keys?" And he pointed down the road, and the guy was like, "Well, why aren't you looking for your keys there?" And the guy said, "Well, because it's light here." So really look for your keys where you lost them, or engage with your alumni where they are, and how they are, and why they are. That's what I would say. So make whatever you want them to do easy, accessible, and leverage where they are and what they're already doing. So for example, if you have a separate portal for them to log into with a whole nother password or a whole nother set of login criteria, they probably will not be doing that at a regular level, which is another reason why Queen's chose to build a networking platform on LinkedIn. Also, did you know that in 2016, 80 million photos were shared on Instagram? So I have to imagine that that's only increased in the last year plus. But what are you doing and how are you interacting on Instagram is a great question to ask. I would really encourage you to make your duck pond attractive. So on social, make sure those perks are useful and well-known, and make sure that you are supporting and guiding your group as best you can. 86% of millennials want to use their specific skills, talents, or expertise to help their alma mater, but they just don't know how, or they just haven't been asked. So young alumni engagement. So everybody asks for mentoring. And a lot of people kind of, the word mentoring means very different things for very different people. And what we found at Queen's was the expectation versus the reality was different. So the expectation on what mentoring meant was somebody who could answer a couple of really high-level questions and maybe guide them in a little bit of a direction towards where they needed to be. In reality, what it means for us as professionals is a very intensive one-on-one relationship over a year where both parties do a lot of work behind the scenes, and it's ultimately really quite rewarding, but takes a lot of effort and resource. And so when you line those two things up, it didn't make sense for us to build a really robust program when most of the students actually just needed a little bit of help to get started and a couple of people to bounce some ideas off of. University leadership is a great place to start with roles and responsibilities. So we're very lucky at Queen's that our university leadership sees the value in empowering our young alumni group, and so they have made some institutional changes to recognize some of the things that were important to students when they were on campus and profile those things as alumni. And so you can engage with the local leaders wherever they end up. I know for a lot of institutions, that's probably in the city that you're in, or for Queen's, I mean, the majority of our alumni population is in Toronto. And so we do a lot of work with our alumni, specifically the young alumni in Toronto, on the ground with those local leaders. And you can really choose who those local leaders are. They were leaders as students, and they will be your leaders as alumni. So look at who the people that were involved on campus were and how they're involved with their community after graduation. So again, layer with existing opportunities. You can absolutely take some of your current projects and just add a young alumni engagement strategy. The fourth building block that I'm going to mention is just make it easy for your alumni population, your young alumni population, to say yes to being where they are, showing tangible benefits to their involvement and impact to the causes that they care about. So the big disclaimer here is that it really means listening to your young alumni population and hearing what they want from you. Okay, this is another opportunity for some quick questions, and I noticed there were some that popped up. So did we do any surveys to know what each group wishes to have from Queens or into inform programming like Queens Connects? So Queens Connects on LinkedIn came about from a number of different ways, and we did. I don't think we have actually a survey, but we did some target marketing question and answer, some really great feedback from our previous platform, which was discontinued, which happens a lot for a lot of the kind of one-off platforms, mentoring platforms. And so we reached out to that group specifically and kind of got some feedback from them, but really kind of looked at the overall trends and behavior demographics as to where networking was happening. We followed up with a number of career resources in the industry and just chose LinkedIn really because it was free and a lot of our alumni were already on LinkedIn. So again, rather than pointing them to a whole new platform, it was more about kind of going to where they already were. Any other questions about some of the young alumni engagement strategies?
Ben, we have a couple of questions, but maybe do you want to hold them until the end because we have just under 15 minutes left.
Yep, absolutely. Great. So with an eye on time, and I apologize, but I'll try and get through kind of the embracing of Generation Show Me. So really, everywhere that kind of we are, we want it all to be about them. So why should they care about you at all? Millennials are a creation of kind of baby boomers and Gen X and what they want. And I really do believe this. It's all about a quest for better, easier lives. I know, I used to hear from my parents about how they used to walk uphill both ways to school through 5 feet of snow in the dead of winter. And that's not fun. Nobody wants to do that. So I think Gen X and baby boomers have really built the lives of millennials so they didn't have to do that. So my whole kind of theme is I don't think you can be mad at a leopard for the color of their spots. So really it's more about how we can change to meet the needs of them. The hard truth is that millennials don't need you or your institution for much anymore. And there's a real strong transactional education model where they come in, they pay, they get their education, and they leave. So really, it's about shifting your focus and always asking with everything that you do, what's in it for them. You can use your faculty partners as campus allies, so many hands making light work, partner, share resources, share data, share talent, find out who those campus leaders or influencers are, and work with them to be able to create really quality programming, quality communications, and quality services for your young alumni population. The power of the dean. So a lot of faculty deans set the priorities for the university. So set up meetings with those people. Ask how your shop can help them solve an issue, maybe not all of their issues, maybe 1 or 2 issues, and then really try to work hard to deliver on that. And strength in numbers. I would say more of us solving this stuff together, the better the entire thing is going to be. So again, the entire world right now, Wikipedia and everything else, it's all based on crowdsourcing. So let's crowdsource this stuff together, and I want you to all to know that I'm a resource, please, but I am also a connector, so let me know if you do have specific questions, and I can probably point you in the right direction. Specifically, homecoming and reunions. So do you offer specific programs for your young alumni? And here at Queens, we offer specific 5th-year reunion programming, and we've also just started a 0th year reunion program. However, a couple of years ago, we actually took the opportunity and polled the graduating class and found out that actually it made more sense to call it Reunion 0. So we have our 50th reunion, 25th reunion, 10th, 5th, and Reunion 0. For fundraising, and that's not the point of this conversation, we can do a lot we could probably do a whole day on fundraising. But marketing, current marketing trends have really trained this group specifically to expect at minimum their name spelled correctly in solicitations. However, they also can expect easily ads based on web activity, not unreasonable to expect that hair color is the same, eye color is the same, type of clothing of the adverts are wearing the same clothing that they wear, eating the same kind of pizza, drinking the same kind of Starbucks, et cetera, et cetera. And we have access to all of this data now. It's unprecedented time. So we can actually scrub some of that information and put it in our solicitations for these groups and show tangibly the impact that those gifts can make on your institution. So my fifth building block is kind of what's in it for them. Lastly, and certainly not least, it's really a dialogue. So just be sure that you are ready to ask your young alumni what they want from you. Be ready with a response. Doesn't have to be right away, but definitely if you collect feedback from them, make sure you are responding with this is what we heard from you, and this is what we're already doing, or this is what we want to plan to do. And ask them to help you do it. And be ready to act. So I wouldn't ask those questions, and I wouldn't provide any answers until you are ready and line up your institution so that it's full force ready to provide that feedback, provide that institutional framework, and show them that they are invested in the process and life of the university. Okay. Well, thank you. I know I kind of flew through those last slides a little bit quickly. Are there any final questions that I can ask?
Yeah, what I'll do, Ben, Tara again, what I'll do is I will unmute the line, so we'll have some vocal questions. But in the chat box, I don't know if you covered these. Are your alumni speakers, I think this from the beginning, are your alumni speakers also prospects? And how does the program or others link back to development?
Right. So that's a great question, and I said that I was going to follow up or that I was going to address it, and I must have skipped that section. So absolutely, most of the time our alumni speakers are prospects, just the profile that they are and they exist in. And so we work very closely with our relationship managers, faculty development officers. If they're winning an award, then the organization that is providing that award. We work with our campus marketing communications office to make sure that we leverage their visit back to campus and get photos and interviews, and also faculty partners, so that if they graduated from the School of English, we can line up an opportunity for them to connect with the faculty specifically. So yeah, we really operate on a very kind of campus inclusive model, and everyone is better for it.
Perfect. Everyone, your lines have been unmuted, so if somebody does have a question they would like to pose over the phone, feel free to do so at this time.
Sorry, so there is the other, would I recommend events, be it networking or lectures, joining students and young alumni on a regular basis, or events for each group separately? So another thing that our Queen's Student Alumni Association does, based on the feedback from our students, was we have a Gales of the Last Decade panel, and that's really about graduates of the last 10 years come back and speak about their careers. We find that profiling the high-profile alumni is great. However, it's not as accessible or realistic for a lot of our students. So we typically get less attendance to our recent grad alumni events. However, the interaction is much deeper and more meaningful for the attendees. Young alumni stewardship, I would say, really has to come from your own institution, and I would not want to provide advice based on my own experience on this. So there's people who do stewardship and fundraising really well. I would say that I do it because I'm invested in the relationships, but you could line up with any of your other colleagues at your institution to figure out what's currently happening, or apply kind of what stewardship opportunities are happening for your older alumni, and take pieces and change it and update it so that it fits with young alumni demographics.
Had you answered how much do you discount the services to students or 1-year grads for career service items? Did you get to that?
No. So career services offers everything, the counseling appointments, it's all free of charge with the exception of the personality profiles, which is offered for less than cost, and I think it's capped at $20 for any of those kind of personality assessments. So whether it's StrengthsFinder or True Colors, or I can't remember the other ones that Career Services offers, but they're really helpful tools as kind of, especially new grads are navigating who they are, what they're looking for, and how to approach their job search. So I mean, it's not ideal that they're kind of for some kind of money, but it's way less than you would get pretty much anywhere else.
Okay. It doesn't seem like there's any more questions in the chat box. Does anybody have any questions they would like to add to the chat box or pose over the phone? All lines have been unmuted.
Terrific. Well, I really appreciate everybody being on the call. Thank you so much. I hope you all have some stuff to take away. And as I mentioned, be in touch. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And Tara will hopefully send out some of the resources that I mentioned to the group after.